Hey,
Hello. Hi, Amy.
how's it going?
Good. It's really good.
That's...
Good morning, everyone. How's it going?
Let's go back. It's good. Thank you. How you doing?
Hi.
I'm doing well. Glad to see such a high attendance today.
Is that sarcastic?
Mildly.
Hey, we're both there. We're not that much help for your agenda, though, right? Your
No.
audience is here.
So GitLab Shell. Let's chat about that real quick. Last week, our initial attempt to roll this out did not go so well. We started saturating our Git fleet, and because of that saturation, we ended up rolling back again, which is unfortunate. If I recall correctly, we left it in place for Canary, taking a low amount of traffic during a second attempt last week. So we made a change to HA Proxy's load balancing mechanism. GitLab Shell was a special use case where we had the type of load balancing algorithm was slightly different. So instead of round robin, which we commonly used elsewhere, this was set up to least con or least connection. So the backend that had the least amount of connections was receiving traffic. So because of that, Canary was effectively automatically taking a lot more traffic than intended because it had less connections. So any new connection was sent to Canary, therefore saturating the Git backend. So with that, we made a change to make it round robin. That way it matches everything else. That way the weights are better honored, I guess I could say, if that's the appropriate mechanism that HA Proxy uses for determining weight. And then during the second run, we effectively left it where Canary has taken a smaller traffic. And if I recall correctly, that was rolled back as well. And it was rolled back because GitLab Shell was throwing a lot of context canceled errors. And at this moment in time, if I recall looking at the issue correctly, Sean Carroll, I believe, is looking into this. Either Sean or Igor is looking into what that error might be. I quickly took a glance at this and I could not determine if this was a failure in GitLab Shell's ability to talk to Getaway, or if this was Getaway taking a long time to respond to the underlying Git command, which therefore canceled, and that canceled was sent all the way upstream to GitLab Shell. I couldn't make any reference to it in correlation IDs or anything, so I did ask Igor if they needed help in this investigation. So far, they have not responded that they need anything, so I think we're just kind of on hold at the moment.
Do you know, do we have any other options for doing more thorough testing on staging? So we've had 3 rollout attempts on production. Each has failed in a different way. I think they've all been, like handled really well and like, but all reasonable failures. But I mean, I'd like to hope this is all of them, but is there actually a better way for us to test this on staging?
I was hoping that the load testing that they performed would have picked up some of this. It's highly unfortunate that it did not.
Could we ask them why it didn't, maybe? Because I'm curious to know, like, other things here that people didn't know to check, or are we genuinely hitting on some unusual stuff?
So for the first reason that we rolled back, that would not have been something the GitLab Shell team would have known, because that was subject to our migration procedure that we tested in staging. But keep in mind that staging doesn't receive much traffic, so that's why that happened.
And remind me, what was the first problem?
The HA proxy change that we made, the load balancing algorithm. So that was something that we didn't predict. Well, Jar predicted this ahead of time, but we didn't think it was going to be a big deal because we didn't see this particular piece, or at least we didn't notice this particular piece during the first attempt. a couple of months ago in the first place. So
Mhm.
this was still surprising for us to run into.
This recent one's more interesting though, right? Like that's kind of the one I'm wondering, like, is there something that we just didn't know to check, or are we actually like
I think that's a
missing
valid
something?
question to ask the GitLab Shell team to figure out how we could
Yeah.
test that out fully. But I do think that our testing, the rollout procedure is more refined. And we're also going to do it a little bit more slowly. So Akamai is prepared to change requests. The first one's going to roll out to Canary. And then we're going to let it sit for a little bit, probably a day, and then roll it out to the rest of the clusters afterwards. So we're going to have a slower rollout intentionally, but the rollback procedure won't change.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm super happy with the rollout and the detection and recovery and stuff. Like we're doing, that stuff we're all handling brilliantly. It's really just if we could avoid some of the overhead of us having to continually open CRs, stop deployments, roll out, incident. There's a lot of overhead of us just sort of having to keep on trying on this.
And everyone wants to see this project through. A lot of customers want to see this feature pushed out. So it'll obviously behoove us to get this out as quickly as possible. So so the question that you just asked, Amy, I'll raise that as necessary to see if we can't figure out, like, maybe additional load testing needs to occur to find this. But I suspect that it's either going to be something that's special because production, or it's just a new use case that they did not hit, and it's something new that was maybe introduced, because it has been over a month since the last time we tried to roll this out. So it could just be that GitLab Shell has progressed, and now there's just a new failure scenario that was not previously known. So I'll take that as an action item to move forward.
Excellent.
Did you already talk about how the latest attempt went?
I glossed over it, but if you have any additional details, the item that I mentioned was the fact that we started to uncover a error message inside of our logs that we don't yet know how to explain.
Okay.
Which is why Canary was shut down.
Yes. So one of the things that we noticed right before rolling out was the scope of the change was pretty broad. It was going to ship the whole thing to all environments over an 8-hour timeframe. And I kind of pushed back on that to do only Canary and have some baking time in between. And once it was on Canary, we discovered complete lack of metrics. So one of the metrics had been renamed, the latency buckets weren't aligned with the apdex. There wasn't an error rate SLI defined. So a lot of stuff missing there, and the dev team is working on fixing all of those. So that's one more reason why we drained Canary. And yeah, as you mentioned, that error message, which I guess was the timeout, the context timeout exceeded or whatever it is, which had we had an error rate SLI, we would have also seen. Yeah, but I think we fixed a lot of the previous round of issues. So all of the HA proxy stuff is resolved. Not sure if that was covered at all. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing up the metrics part. I had forgotten about that one.
Are there metrics that should be added in before the next attempt, or are these just sort of?
Most certainly so. So, I mean, these were metrics that were previously working, but between the last time we attempted this migration and this time, those metrics were changed.
Yeah,
so
one of them was renamed. Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Is that something that that source code stage group are able to do? Great. Okay. Good. I'm sure they're loving this project rollout. Did we? I hope we didn't ever promise them. I have a bad feeling, Igor. I don't know if you remember the kickoff we had last October. I'm fairly sure we told them, oh, this was pretty simple. Don't worry. I feel like we should not say that to people in the future.
Any further questions before the next one? Okay, so now that I'm no longer release manager, I'm still kind of sort of busy at the moment, but I figured I would start picking up some of the Redis migration work, and I'm glad Igor is here. I'm kind of curious I haven't looked at any epic or any issue in terms of where we currently stand, aside from what you showcased in the last demo. So I'm wondering where I should start picking up. I assume, Amy, this is where you probably want me is back on the Redis stuff.
Well, it's a great question. One thing as we go into Q2, question for you, Igor, will be around how much support does delivery need to provide for you to meet whatever the goal is for Q2. So assuming it's some, then for you, Skarbek, the only things you're really balancing against are issues on the board that we do need to do. I think they're all smaller things, so we should drop those in. There's corrective actions and a few labeling things, but I don't think there's anything like significant. Aside from that, it's going to be really about we will certainly have some sort of bigger things that we need to figure out as we go into Q2 to set up work. But I mean, around that stuff, like, yeah, absolutely. If that, you probably do have some time if you want to, also pick up some Redis stuff.
Yeah, so I'd say we're currently blocked waiting on the omnibus thing to go through, hopefully today, waiting on final approval. And then once that's out of the way, we can start rolling that out to pre and then all the other environments. So maybe Ahmad can handle that on his own. I certainly trust him to take care of that. So if you want to focus your efforts elsewhere, Skarbek, for maybe the next 2 weeks or so, yeah, I think that might make more sense. And then once we've got that config change out, we'll have host names enabled everywhere. And then we get to move on to the next phase, which is going to be actually rolling to pre. And I think that's where your help could come in handy again. So I'm looking at starting that, within, well, maybe 2 more weeks to get all of this stuff rolled out. And
okay, that sounds perfect, because that'll fit in nicely with the work that I'm currently got going on. And then, like Amy mentioned, we've got a couple of corrective actions or high priority stuff that I should really pull to help relieve some of the release management toil that's been occurring lately. Excellent.
It could also be worth checking with Ahmad about how, I mean, depending on when SSHD comes back in, because he is on the Redis project, but he's also working on Camo Proxy with Vlad, so he has
he's juggling a lot of stuff. So if you want to take, or if you're able to take some stuff off of his plate,
yeah, I'll work with him to figure out where I could help him out.
Awesome.
Excellent. Okay.
Do you already know, Igor, like what do you think firstly, I guess, is there a Q2 OKR for the Redis migration? And if so, what's the focus?
I don't know, but I'm basically just looking at this list and I'm going, we're going to do the next one. and see how far we get. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's a solid strategy, by the way.
Does this Redis migration kind of fall under our OKR of migrating stuff into Kubernetes?
It sort of does. It certainly fits with our strategy. So yeah, on our
Yeah.
strategy page, migrating 3 additional services into Kubernetes this year. I'm counting rate limiting as one. I'm counting camo proxy as one. And then we have a slot. Maybe it's another Redis instance or something else like Getaway. Also could be a possibility later this year if we want to go. There'll be some great benefits to having Getaway done. So
I would love to chat more about Getaway, but I don't think today's the day. Okay.
I mean, we can do if you want to. If we've got time, like if I may not have answers, but I'm certainly happy to hear what people's questions are. I have to scan the issue where it's been discussed.
Well, before we do that, are there any more questions related to the Redis migration? Okay, so there's not. Okay, so Igor, you and I had a conversation about Getaway one day, and you had some opinions. I'm curious if you want to share those to get this conversation started.
Are they safe for work?
Oh, of course.
So just general Getaway on Kubernetes?
Yeah.
Sounds pretty risky. Let's see. We currently can't. Well, we don't have HA in our Getaway fleet, and so we currently are relying pretty heavily on GCP completely over-delivering on their per instance availability promises. And I don't think that we can maintain that same level of long-running stuff on Kubernetes. Like the nature of Kubernetes is way more ephemeral. And our current Getaway setup isn't really built with that in mind. So that's where I see the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I think to give a little context around where we are with, so we've been talking about whether Getaway could be migrated onto Kubernetes for coming up to a year now, like with the Getaway team. And the general view is not the Getaway cluster, but the Getaway service should be possible. The software engineer in test, John, who works with Getaway, he's done some testing, and his view is from what he's tested so far, it should also be possible. However, there's a lot of unknowns, and I think the unknowns that we have are more around. I think it's very similar to the Redis project, right? Like the unknowns are around performance and data, and how would it actually behave? So I think we're quite close to it getting to the stage of we will probably have answered as many questions as could be answered by discussion and John doing testing. I think we're probably not that far, when I say that far, like probably some months, but we're not that far away from just getting to the point where trying this on pre and giving John a proper environment where he can properly test will answer the next round of questions. I think we're running out of ways to really pinpoint like what is going to be the big problem if we did this. Getaway cluster is definitely out. The Getaway team don't want that on Kubernetes. That doesn't make sense. But the Getaway service could. So that's probably where we're up to. But there's still a heap of question marks that I think at the moment nobody can easily validate or answer.
They're not really thinking about running this in Kubernetes, meaning that they just want to set up a deployment and have it running. They're probably thinking about stateful set or something that is just clever way to pack something that is not designed to run in Kubernetes into Kubernetes. I mean, there's this, they need their own storage. So each node requires especially if you're not talking the cluster, which I was expecting to be easier to migrate to Kubernetes. But the storage node
that has some known things. So that one definitely won't go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds more like we want to move it because we want to move it, then there's actually a real use case for it and is worth doing it. Because from the infrastructure point of view, this is kind of a high risk operation, which doesn't really outline any benefits out of it, because that thing is not designed to run in a cluster environment, and all the benefits from it are just adding risk.
So there are definitely some benefits. Like lots of users want to be able to run in this way, but I think what we can't do right now is there is nobody who's put together a full benefits, risks, and actually, you know,
I understand that they want to run it. And my point is that when they expect they do not lose their data. That's a base assumption.
No,
and
exactly.
Are we going to maintain this assumption when we move it into Kubernetes?
Well, that's what we need to test. That's what we can do, right? So I think there's a known use case, and from what we've seen so far, what we've tested so far, nobody's been able to demonstrate a problem, even though lots of people have concerns. And so I think what that's saying is we don't have a good enough test environment to properly stand this up and be able to properly load test. So that's where I think we're getting to the point where we've probably answered as many questions, not yet, but we're quite close to answering as many questions as we can. We haven't yet got to the point where we go, oh, this is how it performs and these are the limitations. And then at that point we go, okay. So I think trying to get it stood up on pre, which we can then hand back to John, who can then have a proper environment he can load test on, we'll be able to answer. So there's a lot of questions around how will this perform? What will be the risks? We don't have this standing up anywhere to be able to answer that right now. When people run it locally, which several people have been through, it looks fine. But of course, it's a very different scenario, right? You're running.
Works on my machine.
Yeah, exactly, right? Which we've all seen what that happens. So I think we probably will want to be able to get this testable, basically, as the next step.
One question that I had was, you mentioned we don't want to do this with Getaway cluster. I was under the impression that there was a general goal of moving towards Getaway cluster. This now sounds like we've got two competing paths.
Yes, let me ping you on the comments. So yes, from the Getaway team, they are reviewing. So following the issues they had last year that they had to deal with, yes, they are focused on improving the Getaway cluster as a product, getting that fully functional. And then once they've completed that, I think they have a reasonable roadmap though, so they don't want to change anything right now. Once they so hang on a sec. So once that has been solved, then they will review, do they actually want to be able to offer that on Kubernetes?
I think that still leaves open the question of where do we want to go? Do we want to go to Kubernetes? Do we want to go to Getaway cluster, or do we want both?
So from the sort of perspective that we've been talking about in the working group, it's about being able to validate user requests for, can I run Getaway service on Kubernetes? Whether there's a different requirement for .com, I mean, I think that's a kind of other conversation. But at the moment, we don't know if it's possible, right? So we're not planning to move to Getaway cluster right now. But I think the Getaway roadmap will affect some of this as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, if a user asks to run Getaway on Kubernetes, it kind of underlines that they expect this to run in a Kubernetes way, then is fault tolerant, can be rescheduled, and you can just, it kind of implies that it's HA capable. But if we are just allowing them to run that thing on Kubernetes, like if it's a VM, then there is a missed expectation, right? Because you can run Postgres on Kubernetes, then the pods get rescheduled and you lost your data.
Sure, but no one's been able to validate that. And that's the point, right? Like, I think that's the thing that John's not able to show so far.
Yeah, no, my point is that when Igor was making, there's a competing path here. So if the GitLab the prefect cluster was designed to give us HA, and people are not asking for this because they just want to run it on Kubernetes, there could be this expectation that if it runs in Kubernetes is HA capable,
sure,
while it is not, right? That's the point, right? So yeah, I mean, that's.
Yeah, I guess to kind of summarize my take on that and I guess I'm looking at this from kind of the reliability lens now. We've wanted HA on Gitly for GitLab.com for a long time. I think this poses the greatest risk to our availability architecturally right now. What kind of worries me about this plan is if we're moving towards a design that is explicitly not supporting Gitly cluster, we're kind of closing off that path. And so that's basically why I'm making a little bit more noise about it, but I'll leave it at that.
Are we, is there a plan? Like, is there already a plan in place to move .com to Gitly cluster?
I hear about this plan every couple of months.
Okay. So
I don't know if anyone's
like
actually doing anything about it.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that clears it up, Skarbek. Am I right?
It certainly adds color to this conversation. Amy, if you would be so kind as to drop the testing issue that John.
Done. I've linked as well to the comment that Mark Wood, Gitly product manager, left.
Because so you say we need to get this to a testable point. I think something we could do prior to us spending effort in introducing this into pre-prod is providing a scenario for him to test on. And my primary use case is we should do some sort of load test, kill the pod. If any
I
user
believe
request
John's
fails,
done that. Have a look through the issue. Like, I think
Okay,
there's some major confusion on this issue because unfortunately, Gitly means quite a lot of things. So there is a point about halfway through the issue where it suddenly becomes like, where it's like, not Gitly cluster, Gitly service, but everything's just called Gitly. So, but have a look through. John has done quite a lot of testing, and he did quite a lot originally on the cluster and found some issues. And then it was like, oh no, on the service, he did some extra testing on the service and was like, actually, from what I've seen, it seems to work. So have a look through there and see if there's any. Basically, have got to the point where, I mean, we're clearly not in a position to take on any new migration stuff. Like, we have plenty of work to do to get through Camo and to get through Redis, so that's fine. I don't think John has any more scenarios that he's knows of to test. So if you have suggestions, then please add them. And then I think what we don't know is whether like where this sits in the Gitly roadmap, and from a product point of view, whether, you know, how much do they want it, how much time are they with it. So say, assuming we stood this up somewhere, did a load of testing and found problems on Gitly, I don't know how much they would want to spend time having to fix that and take away from other priorities. So that's the sort of product side as well. But yeah, have a look through that issue. There's certainly, John did quite a lot of testing. and tried to reproduce sort of those sorts of problems. And I don't believe he hit any.
Okay. Because I've got some stuff that's hanging out in the back of my mind that I feel like is kind of blockers from us even having a chance of really continuing this conversation at this moment. So
Sounds good.
I kind of want to make sure those get addressed. And this issue should be where we can at least uncover those issues, if not seen already. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll take a look and I'll
That's what I
comment as
think.
necessary.
Great. Thanks for that.
Excellent. Is there anything else anyone wants to chat about today?
I wanted to ask about the cluster recreation stuff. Where are we at on that?
Would you be surprised if we said we'd solved it? We haven't solved it. You should be surprised. It's done, Igor. Don't worry about that.
We're still in the planning phases at the moment. I'm currently working with Amy to refine the necessary issues and epics, and then we'll be working to prioritize that for the next quarter.
Cool, thanks.
The additional piece we're working on, so in the future, so we've got an issue with a proposed team split, and sort of in the future, delivery will hopefully be able to sort of focus more on how the application runs on the cluster. So these sorts of things, there's sort of a where does this fit between reliability and delivery? So I think in the immediate, we'll probably look at doing some of the like short-term solutions to try and get us out of the immediate danger zone. And then maybe there's phases of like, you know, can we just drain the cluster and get the more IP addresses that we need? And then is there another step to like improve how we do that? And then a kind of later step to automate or something like that. But I think we'll have to do something this quarter to get some IPs. So assume that will get done one way or another. And then longer term, I think automated cluster recreation like later in this year by either delivery or reliability.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for showing up today. I greatly appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Take care, everyone.